George's Marvellous Medicine, Chapter 10. Now, you might remember that Grandma is still stuck with her head sticking out the roof. So we might need to figure out what's going to happen next, because this chapter is called A Crane for Grandma. I'll show you the picture. If you don't know, this is called a crane. You see them a lot in Singapore when they're building buildings. The crane lifts things up to greater heights. Grandma, from high up on the rooftop, could see everything that was going on. She didn't like what she saw. She wanted to be the center of attention. Do you know what that means? It means she wants to be the most important person there. And nobody was taking the slightest notice of her. George and Mr. Cranky were running around getting excited about enormous animals. Mrs. Cranky was washing up in the kitchen, and Grandma was all alone in the rooftop. "Hey, you!" she yelled at George. "Make me a cup of tea, you little beast." "Don't listen to her," said Mr. Cranky. "She's stuck where she is, and it's a good thing too." "We can't leave her there," George said. "What if it rains?" "George," Grandma yelled. "Oh, you horrible little boy, you disgusting little worm, fetch me a cup of tea at once. And a slice of cake." Oh, she's horrible to George. "We'll have to get her out, Dad. She won't give us any peace if we don't." Mrs. Cranky came outside and she agreed with George. "She's my own mother," she said. "She's annoying," said Mr. Cranky. Awful. "I don't care," Mrs. Cranky said. "I'm not leaving my own mother sticking with her head through the roof for the rest of her life." So in the end, Mr. Cranky telephoned the crane company and asked them to send the biggest crane out to the house at once. Imagine how confused they're going to be when they arrive there and they find it's a lady who's grown so tall, her head's gone through the roof. The crane arrived 1 hour later. It was on wheels and there were 2 men inside. The crane men climbed up onto the roof and put ropes under Grandma's arms. I see. They put the ropes under her arms so they could lift her up. Then she was lifted right from the roof. In a way, the medicine had done Grandma good. It was not made her any less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it seemed to have cured all her aches and pains, and she was suddenly really, really energetic. As soon as the crane had lowered to the ground, she ran over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost. Oh, because the pony's huge, and Grandma's huge, so she ran over to Jack Frost the pony, and she jumped on his back. Jack Frost, this ancient old lady, ancient means old, who was now as tall as a house, galloped about the farm on a gigantic pony, jumping over trees and sheds and shouting, "Out of my way, clear the deck, stand back, you miserable people, I'll trample you to death," and other silly, horrible things like that. But because Grandma was now too tall to get back into the house, she had to sleep at night in the barn, on the hay, with mice and rats. Chapter 11. Oh, because Grandma can't get in the house, she's too big. I wonder what they're going to do to fix the roof. This is chapter 11 and it's called Mr. Cranky's Great Idea. And it looks as if he's telling George of his great plan. I wonder, you might want to pause this and talk to your friend about what you think the plan is. The next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of great excitement than ever. "I've been awake all night thinking about it." "About what, Dad?" "About your marvellous medicine, of course. We can't stop now, my boy. We must start making more of it at once. More and more and more." The giant saucepan had been completely emptied the day before because there'd been so many sheep and pigs and cows and bullocks and even, remember that, horse. "But why do we need more?" George asked. "We've done all our own animals and we've made Grandma feel as happy as can be. Even though she does have to sleep in the barn." "My dear boy," cried Mr. Killy Cranky, "we need barrels and barrels of it, tons and tons. Then we'll sell it to every farmer in the world so that all of them can have giant animals. We will build a marvellous medicine factory and sell the stuff in bottles at £5 a time. Like pounds is money in England. We will become rich and you will become famous. But wait a minute, Dad, George said. There's no waiting, cried Mr. Cranky, working himself up, so much that he had put butter in his coffee and milk on his toast. Oh, he got muddled. Instead of putting butter on his toast, he put the butter in his coffee, and he put milk on his toast. That was funny. Don't you understand what this tremendous invention of yours is going to do in the world? Nobody will ever go hungry again. Why won't they? Because one giant cow will give 50 buckets of milk a day. One giant chicken will make 100 fried chicken dinners. And one giant pig will give you 1,000 giant pork chops. It's tremendous, it's fantastic, it'll change the world. But wait a minute, Dad, said George. Don't keep saying, wait a minute, boy, shouted Mr. Cranky. This isn't a minute to wait. We must get cracking at once. Do calm down, my dear, Mrs. Cranky said from the other end of the table, and stop putting marmalade on your cornflakes. Oh, said Mr. Cranky, come on, George, let's get going. And the first thing we'll do is make one more saucepan of tester. But Dad, the trouble is... Okay, talk to your neighbour about what you think the trouble is. There's a problem now. George has a problem. Three, 2, 1. There won't be any trouble, my boy, cried Mr. Cranky. How can there possibly be any trouble? All you've got to do is put the same stuff into the saucepan as you did yesterday. And while you're doing it, I'll write down each and every item. That's how we'll get the magic recipe. But Dad, listen to me. Why don't you listen to her, Mrs. Cranky said. The boy's trying to tell you something. But Mr. Cranky was too excited to listen to anyone except himself. And then, when the new mixture is ready, we'll test it out on an old hen just to make absolutely sure we've got it right. And after that, we'll shout hooray and build a giant factory. But Dad, you need to listen to me. Come on then. What is it you want to say? Okay, turn and tell your neighbour what you think he's going to say. 3, 2, 1. I can't possibly remember the 100 things that I put in yesterday. Of course you can, my dear boy. I'll help you. I'll jog your memory. You'll get it in the end. See if you don't. Now then, what was the first thing you put in? I went up to the bathroom first, George said, and I used a lot of things in the bathroom and on Mummy's dressing table. Come on then, cried Killy Cranky. Up we go to the bathroom. When they got there, they found, of course, a whole lot of empty tubes, empty cans and empty bottles. That's great. That'll tell us exactly what to use. If anything's empty, it means you used it. So Mr. Cranky started making a list of anything that was empty in the bathroom. Then they went to Mrs. Cranky's dressing room. A box of powder, said Mr. Cranky, writing it down. Perfume, terrific. That's going to be easy. Where did you go next? Do you remember where he went next? See if you can tell your neighbour, where did he go next? Did you say the laundry, where you do the washing? But Dad, are you sure I haven't missed anything out? Well, that's up to you, my boy. Have you? I don't think so. So down they went to the laundry room, and once again Mr. Cranky wrote down the names of all the empty bottles and cans. My goodness me, what a lot of stuff you used. No wonder it did magic things. Is this the lot? But we know. Is it the lot? Did they just finish at the laundry? No, Dad, that's not it, said George, and he led his father out to the shed where the animal medicines were, and Mr. Cranky wrote all that down. Anything else? George scratched his head and thought, but he couldn't remember anything else. Mr. Killiecrankie leapt into his car and drove down to the village and bought all the new bottles and tubes and cans of everything on the list. He then went to the vet and got a fresh supply of all the animal medicine. Now, show me how you did it, George. Come along, show me exactly how you mixed them all together. That's the end of that chapter. Maybe you would like to try and write out the recipe for yourselves or draw all the ingredients. Good luck.